Haunted baby's room? This next paranormal story is from a mother on Reddit. She's sharing her encounter with the paranormal that's been living in her house. Let's listen to her story. This is my first paranormal post, and I will preface by saying I'm not completely convinced of the paranormal, but something has definitely not seemed right in my house for years. I don't know what to do, if anything. I love my home and moving is not an option. A warning that this is a long story. Let me begin by giving you a bit of background information. I live in a large home and have 3 kids. My now ex-husband and I built the home over 10 years ago from the ground up. An old house used to be on the lot, we tore it down and built a new home. When we moved in at that time, I only had 1 baby. I had decorated a bedroom as the nursery, and there he stayed until I became pregnant with my second baby, Max. We then moved him into the bedroom down the hall, which we decorated to be a little less nursery-like and more little boy-like. I had never had a good feeling about this end of the house and tried to make sure this room felt warm and cozy. Right outside the door of this room was a spot that always made me uneasy. For over 10 years, this spot has made me feel creeped out for no logical reason. The first while went without an issue for my then 3-year-old, which surprised me as I expected some adjustment period, but all was good. After about the first month, around 3 a.m., I heard him scream in absolute terror over the baby monitor. It jolted me awake and I ran into his room. John was standing in his crib, pointing to the corner across the room. "Pirate, Mommy! Pirate!" He kept pointing. I looked in the dark corner but didn't see anything. He kept pointing wide-eyed. I didn't hesitate. I whisked him up and carried him to my bedroom. And so began an almost nightly occurrence of John coming to our bed around 3 a.m. Anytime John slept in his new room, he would wake up in terror. So I moved him back into the nursery with his baby brother. This arrangement worked out fine. John's room sat empty at the end of the hall for years. Then came a weekend when my husband and I were going for a weekend getaway and leaving the boys with my dad and his partner Maria, an Indonesian woman who was quite religious. Her ethnicity doesn't really make a difference. I'm just trying to paint a picture here. The first night after we were away, I called to check in. Maria got on the phone right away and whispered so my dad wouldn't hear her. She was hard to understand through her panic and her accent, to be honest. I woke up in the middle of the night because I heard talking down the hall outside John's old bedroom. It sounded like a man and a younger boy. I thought a TV was left on somewhere, so I got up to turn it off. I heard the talking coming from down the hall. I walked down the hall. They started talking faster, more urgent, until I got to John's room. They didn't stop talking, they just started whispering. She was absolutely terrified. I could tell was afraid to mention it to me because she didn't want to seem crazy, but found it necessary to tell me. She whispered because she couldn't explain this to my dad. He would not be pleased by such nonsense, so she'd been waiting for me to call. I hadn't told anyone about the hallway or John's room or anything. Maria's experience reinforced that I wasn't imagining that there was something slightly ominous going on. Fast forward 9 years later. My husband and I had divorced, not because of anything paranormal, but because of his secretary, haha, and I was now remarried to a great man. Things had moved pretty quickly. My new husband moved in. I had never told him, or anyone else for that matter, of what I felt in the house. We got a pug and a rescue dog. Often the dogs would sit in the foyer and stare intently into the dining room, and then furiously start barking in unison. The dining room was below John's room on the first floor, and was always another area I got goosebumps. It is a large, beautiful room with a chandelier, fireplace, and long table for 12 people. The dogs did this often, and it only happened when they were looking into the dining room. The dogs never went in the dining room, except for the occasional time the pug took a crap under one of the dining chairs. Lol. I think it was an FU to whatever entity is in there. Otherwise, the dogs just sat straight up, side by side in the foyer, staring into the dining room for the longest while, until they would both start barking furiously at the same time. My new husband had a home office across the hall from the dining room. When I would come downstairs, every light was always turned on. I asked him why, and he said it was because he had this eerie feeling he was being watched from the dining room, and it unnerved him when the dogs sat and stared into the darkness. So he liked to keep the lights on. I got pregnant with my 3rd child. John was now 10 and wanted his own room, so we had converted the guest room to be his bedroom because he refused to go into his old bedroom. Max stayed in the original nursery, and we were going to gulp use the room at the end of the hall for the baby. I told myself that I was silly. It would be fine, it was such a beautiful room, but I couldn't bring myself to have my newborn sleeping in there. We decorated it especially for him, but nope, couldn't bring myself to leave a newborn in the dark in this room. So he slept in our room, in a bassinet and then a playpen for a full year. Surprisingly, my husband agreed. He said he felt it too and was hesitant to leave him in that room. I was relieved I didn't seem crazy, but also felt more dread about my intuition being correct. Eventually, though, it was time for the baby to have his own room. So we bit the bullet and moved the baby in there. We also hired a nanny to help out during the day. She was a sweet little Filipino woman. I came home one afternoon to find a little glass statue of Jesus on the baby's bookshelf and a rosary pinned to the bulletin board in his room. I thanked the nanny for the little gifts but asked her what was behind them. "It's for protection, ma'am. There is something very bad in that room." I was floored and I filled with dread again. She felt it too. It reinforced I wasn't imagining it all. Surprisingly, all went well, mostly with the baby sleeping. I had a very bright nightlight in the room and had the hall well lit as well, which seemed to help. However, one night, a similar occurrence that had happened almost 10 years ago with my firstborn seemed to play out again. I woke up around 3 a.m. to my now 2-year-old baby letting out a shriek of terror. I ran into his room, and there he stood in his crib, pointing to the corner of the room that my other son had pointed to years ago. "Clown, mummy, clown," he kept pointing. So not a pirate this time, but his vocabulary is limited given he's only 2, and not sure he could articulate exactly what he saw. Also, he does not like clowns. Who does really? Again, I saw nothing. I managed to settle him down and he went back to sleep. But occasionally he will wake up in the night and I hear him say, "Go away," in his little baby voice, almost angrily. I don't see anything on the baby monitor, but it's positioned over his crib. It doesn't show anywhere else in the room. Other things have happened over the years. The TV in the basement has turned on by itself a few times, volume full blast. No one uses the TV in the basement. The weird thing is I couldn't turn it off at first. The remote was not responding. There is also a mirror we have in the front hallway. I admit it's creepy in a way I didn't realize until my now 2-year-old pointed out. I may post a pic. Whenever my now 2-year-old sees it, he says, "Clown mommy." It's a decorative mirror, no clowns or anything, but if you look at it, you may or may not see why it's creepy. It's an antique that a designer picked out years ago. Anyway, not sure what to do, if anything. Have tried sage. I say prayers and it seems to get better for a while, and then the odd things start up again. I love my home and am accustomed to the creepy areas. I just live with it. My 2-year-old does love playing in his room during the day, but prefers to be downstairs in the playroom. So what do you guys think? Is it an evil spirits or a good one? Tell me what you think and if you ever been in the same experience.